One company was the gateway to the internet for millions. America Online. From checking to see if you had an email
You've got mail.
to instant messaging, everyone was hooked. AOL was the first company to create billions from the internet and became part of the largest media company in the world.
AOL Time Warner.
So how could something so vital be gone? This is the remarkable story that explains how the company that was the front page of the internet became a ghost site that no one visits.
I am the greatest. My power of iterated. Yeah. History I'm creating. It's there for the taking. It's destiny in the making. It's destiny in the making.
I remember so significantly when the internet became a thing.
And back then, there wasn't any high-speed connections. The only way to get on was by using dial-up.
This is how I actually got introduced to AOL. I was in a grocery store, and I remember everyone just grabbing these discs and taking them home because at the time, no one knew how to access the internet easily. And that's how me and all of my friends end up usually getting hooked on AOL.
And my breath catches in my chest until I hear 3 little words.
You've got mail.
This was the first time I remember wanting to rush home from school so that I could get online, and we would hang out on AOL as long as we could until we had to go to bed, really.
This is like social media 1.0.
AOL, it was the only place to be online.
AOL is where it's at.
Goodbye.
To understand the rise of AOL, you have to go back to the 90s.
I was at the Wall Street Journal in the late 90s, and then I was recruited to the Washington Post, and the internet was one of those massive tectonic changes in our lives.
An online network called Internet.
In 1991, the internet became open to the public, but there was an issue. There was nothing there, like no search engines, no sites.
You literally just had to go and guess what a domain name could be and see where it leads you. Even newscasters didn't know what the @ sign was.
The A and then the ring around it?
At.
What is internet anyway?
All of business is marketing and innovation, so if there was ever the quintessential CEO, it would be Steve Case.
He arrived at AOL in his very early stages. It wasn't even called AOL.
And so he came into AOL as a marketing guy.
The first thing he does is create a brand name that's super consumer friendly, America Online. It looked way different than the rest of their competitors, and that's why it took off.
They made it accessible for everybody. My name's Carlos Silva. We sold a company, an interactive television company called Net Channel, to Steve Case. I was the onboarding executive when we brought Net Channel up, and so I was the VP of AOL TV.
It was a new technology that had to be commercialized for public use. AOL was the first company that really did that. AOL decides that they now want to go public, and they become the first ever internet company to do so. And on the very first day of trading, their stock went up 28%. Now, this was a huge jump, and naturally it attracted all of these venture capitalists to the field. Now, what AOL did to get it to the masses was carpet bombing, where literally they flooded CDs everywhere.
Sent right to your house. You could put the CD right inside of your computer.
The thinking was, if you just try it, you're gonna like it. And it was true. People loved it.
And that resulted in them getting a new subscriber every 6 seconds.
Jan Brandt was in this meeting, and all the CD-ROMs were on the table. I remember it was like absurd how ugly that CD-ROM was. And Jan said, well, that's fine that you think that, Carlos. She's like, that is the most successful CD-ROM ever.
In 1 year, they went from 0 to 1 million subscribers. In the second year, they got to 5 million subscribers, which gave them a value of $6.8 billion. When AOL originally launched, they actually charged by the minute. And so for them, it was really about how do we keep these people on as long as humanly possible, because that's how we're gonna make money.
AOL created a digital gold rush.
Internet companies were being formed, it seemed overnight. It was called the dot-com, boom.
Now there's a fast, free, easy way to look for a job. It's gotajob.com.
And they were getting venture capital funding, and they were paying AOL to advertise within the AOL universe. And they were making, millions upon millions of dollars.
This boom that was happening was going across the entire sector, and AOL was one of the biggest recipients of it.
And then when AOL Instant Messenger dropped, it was groundbreaking.
Instant Messenger changed the game forever and allows you to talk to your friends immediately.
All of that led to people staying on AOL so much longer and allowing them to get more and more advertising dollars. Their value went up to $125 billion. AOL just goes on an acquisition spree. They end up buying their #1 competitor, CompuServe.
The stock price was going up because it was the darling of Wall Street, it was the darling of the internet.
AOL was young, fresh, inventive. They had all this internet money, younger kids that had stock options and were suddenly millionaires.
When you walked into the offices, you were so happy to be part of the team. Steve Case, he would have keg parties and he would hand out t-shirts. He was a super positive, let me remind you that we're changing the world.
He got out of hand. There was one executive who always had her stair climber delivered to whatever hotel she was staying at, used it, and then just left it there.
You have an innovator. This is what Steve Case is, and he's looking for more. And at this point, he has all this power that he's attracted to his company. So how do the big get bigger? He really makes a bold move by going to a media company. And this is when he eyes up Time Warner.
We're pleased to have all of you here with us today as we announce the merger to create the first global media and communications company of the internet century.
Anything that can blow up will.
AOL, they acquired Time Warner for $182 billion. That shakes the entire landscape of business.
For me, this represents the digital transformation of Time Warner.
What happened here was you had two very powerful behemoths coming together.
It was a really groundbreaking event. It was such a huge deal, just very shocking to people, shocking to shareholders, shocking to consumers.
The AOL Time Warner deal making the cover of Business Week and Newsweek and Time Magazine. Kind of a triple threat there.
Biggest merger in US history, and it was to create the biggest media company in the world.
I did it with as much or more excitement and enthusiasm as I did on that night when I first made love some 42 years ago.
Folks who brought AOL and Time Warner together were innovators. Jerry Levin with HBO. He understood technology can be a great way to inject life into your companies. Time Warner was having trouble getting into the internet.
I remember coming out here to LA and going to the Warner Brothers studios. AOL and Time Warner together are gonna have these great heritage brands. Warner Brothers, CNN, Sports Illustrated, they were all part of the family now. How is anyone else gonna compete?
But not everyone sees the AOL Time Warner proposal as the deal of deals.
AOL was one company ran a certain way, and Time Warner is really 6 companies independently ran.
When you're talking about merging all these things together, there's so many things that you don't know until you actually start working together.
But there are two different clashes of cultures, and so these two cultures didn't really match or unite very well.
On one hand, you had AOL, which was young people with new money.
I remember meeting a lot of these individuals who were talking about, oh yeah, I made my first million and now I got to figure out what I want to do with my life. And it was a different culture. So yes, there were all these newly minted millionaires.
Then we had all these people from Time Warner who had worked for the company for 40 years. They had a pension.
And the AOL folks resented the Time Warner folks because they felt that the Time Warner folks were sort of snooty and thought they knew it all.
Which they were calling the country clubbers, these old people who didn't understand what was coming.
AOL was the acquiring company.
AOL bought Time Warner. And so AOL wanted the stuff to be AOL.
AOL, their opinion was, we're the #1 internet company out there, and we're going to turbocharge all your old economy stuff.
CNN was like, no, we're CNN. Yeah, you can have some of it for AOL News, but we're not going to put the things together. That's how we were thinking about it. There was no way culturally to get 75 years old brand together under an AOL umbrella. Just wasn't going to happen.
When you're talking about merging all these things together, it's going to take years to do.
November of 2000, the dot-com bubble bursted.
5 years after it started, the boom was turned to bust.
In one night, most companies online lost 80% of their value.
The venture capital money just went away, and these companies were left to die.
Wiping out 80% of value of internet companies.
A lot of these dot-coms ran out of money. They spent it all, a lot of it on AOL advertising, and then they had no product that was making no money.
The stock was $150 a share, goes to 50, goes to 30. It affects everything.
And those that had pensions and retirement funds in Time Warner are being eroded, caused by AOL.
Their stock options were underwater.
To put salt in the wound, all the advertisers are now going away. Now, Time Warner, this legacy brand, is now propping up AOL, and I'm sure that had to cause a lot of conflict.
Morale was pretty bad all across the board.
The first time in history, their stock is in a single-digit stock price. And once you get into penny stock territory, which is when the stock is between $1 and $10, it is usually a sign that death is coming for your company.
Do you start thinking about finding another job because my stock options aren't worth anything? Time Warner sort of took over the company and then went in direction. It got blown apart in a lot of different pieces.
All of the people at Time Warner, their criticisms were justified. And to make matters worse, started to lose on the internet service provider side.
The internet consumers want something different. They want faster speeds, more reliability.
Broadband was coming around, and AOL was still stuck with this dial-up.
And to make matters even worse, Time Warner actually had a broadband service provider.
I'm on the internet in a nanosecond.
Call now for fabulous digital cable and Roadrunner high-speed online and get a great deal on both.
And instead of saying, hey, AOL, let's use Roadrunner together, Time Warner said, no, we don't even want you using Roadrunner at all. That's our thing. And now the AOL says, okay, then you can't advertise on AOL without having to pay us.
The rift between the brands that had been around for 50 years and the brand that had been around for 10 just got wider.
A lot of people call this the worst merger in history, and it's hard to argue with that.
So there was a lot of maneuvering going on behind the scenes. Steve wasn't happy with the way things were going, in particular with Jerry Levin. Levin thought he was in charge as CEO. As chairman, Steve thought he was in charge.
It also sets AOL up for devastating failure. Steve Case, he had been such a visionary on Wall Street, but now he was seen as a villain and villainized against his own company.
Steve Case did what he could to try to indicate that he could lead different functions, including the Emmys. You know, he was trying to show that he was somebody who was relevant, but it was too late. His days were numbered.
Steve Case, he looks at the situation and says, this culture is never going to change in its current status. And so he decides that he's going to step away from being chairman of the board.
I was there when they took AOL sort of off of the brand and just turned it back into Time Warner. I happened to be there the day when a ladder was there, and I was like, what's going on with that ladder? And they were taking AOL off of the side.
In 2006, they decide to make a pivot and say, hey, we're going to become a content site.
They have one Hail Mary idea, which was actually brilliant.
AOL used to be the premier place for people to go on the internet to go get their content. Now they're going to places like Facebook and YouTube.
What if we acquire maybe Facebook or YouTube?
They end up getting shut down by their board because the board is predominantly Time Warner people, and they don't want to see these acquisitions.
In one of the biggest media marriages of the decade, Time Warner announced the details of its long-awaited divorce from AOL after the bell yesterday.
AOL acquired Time Warner for $182 billion. They were spun off by Time Warner for $3.5 billion. It's a pretty big loss.
It had all this promise, and yet they never really did satisfy Wall Street with its results.
They're not giving up, they're not going down without a fight. In 2010, they have an amazing idea to create their own original content. They're not done trying to come back.
Do a show on a park bench.
A talking show on a park bench.
So So AOL, once again, they were kind of ahead of their time in thinking that original content was going to be the future, which we all know it is today.
It was really impressive of them to innovate to that level after what they had already been through.
They won a daytime Emmy. Revenue went up to $625 million, and even though AOL was left for dead after they were spun off from Time Warner, they are now punching back, and it seems like there is light at the end of the tunnel.
And then this attracts Verizon to come to the table.
Verizon buying AOL
for $4.4 billion. Far cry from buying Time Warner for $182 billion. But if you're AOL at this point, the fact that anybody still wants you after everything that's happened is probably a pretty cool thing.
And Verizon's innovating, trying to bring content to the mobile space.
The thing that Verizon is seeing is now we can give the Verizon users something to watch on their phone, keep people on longer. There's a way to monetize there, which ties in to Steve Case's original vision and theory when he built AOL. But Verizon says, we think we need a little bit more bang for our buck. We're also going to buy Yahoo.
Verizon has agreed to buy Yahoo for a whopping $4.8 billion. The internet giant has been struggling to keep up with its competitors.
They bundle those two together and turn it into a company called Oath.
Two of the oldest online companies that once revolutionized the internet will join forces to become a new digital brand.
What is Oath? I don't know 50 people, if we paid them $100, could tell you what Oath was.
The decision to take Yahoo and AOL and turn it into Oath is one of the biggest branding nightmares. It's almost like taking Kim Kardashian and Jennifer Aniston and merging them into one giant celebrity and naming it Steve.
What the audience actually wanted, and the answer was no, this was not the fix.
This ends up not working, and they have to rebrand again.
It's a mess.
I do hear if you were able to find a buyer for them, you would sell them. Is that true?
Verizon makes such a big mistake with Oath, they end up just spinning it off into a private equity fund.
Verizon inking a deal this morning with Apollo to sell AOL and Yahoo.
They're the ones getting kicked to the curb by everyone. Time Warner ends up getting rid of them. Verizon buys them, ends up getting rid of them. They're kind of just getting thrown around like trash.
AOL has announced that their long-running instant messenger service will shut down for good in December. AOL's announcement said simply, goodbye.
This was the premier brand of the internet.
For years, I thought AOL was the internet, and then they're just housed underneath other companies like a stepchild. It's one of the greatest falls that we've seen, not only in modern media, but in the technology space as well.
AOL is studied in business schools, and they dissect it to understand. So, the idea is you don't do the same thing, you do it differently.
AOL, if you look at it today, was a combination of Instagram, Netflix, and Google. And now if you ask most kids what AOL is today, most people can't even tell you what it was. I think the desire was to become big too fast, and when you don't have the same vision and you're not in alignment, it's almost impossible for a merger of this size to work.
What they couldn't do was partner with the right people.
They were just in different sort of time, space continuums. The way that they operated was just different. AOL was running, and Time Warner was like, we're Time Warner. We don't need to run, we're the market makers. And eventually, I think that maybe that rub just never really got us where we needed to get.
Right now, this very moment, 1,000 people still use dial-up.
Now, kudos to all 1,000 of you.
They're like a living, breathing time capsule. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're like a relic.
You've got mail.
I cannot be stopped, I cannot be stopped. I cannot be stopped, I cannot be stopped. I cannot be stopped, I cannot be stopped. I cannot be stopped. I cannot be stopped, I cannot